Well, hello everybody and welcome. Excuse me, we're just having troubles once again. Let me see if that makes it any better for now. Yes, here we are. We will get everything back up and working. I literally just hit play to go live and then the computer suddenly turned itself off once again. I think, I'll be honest with you, I think it's because it is cold today. I don't know what it's like where you are, but it is certainly cold here in Littlehampton, West Sussex. How are we all doing? So cold, I've had to put the heater on in advance. How are we all doing? Hope you're keeping well, hope you're keeping warm. And has anybody out there had any damage with the recent rain, this storm? I forget its name that we've had this week, but the storm that's came through. Anybody had any damage? We've been quite lucky here. More importantly, and the thing that I really like is this weekend we have had some fantastic weather to go outside, to go down the allotment, to go out in the garden and tackle quite a few jobs. I'm just trying to get this computer to cook back in. So while we wait for that to kick in, am I live on Facebook? It says I am. It says I am live, don't it? Yeah, it should be. Anybody on Facebook able to tell me if I am live on Facebook? Let's have a look who we have joining us tonight. Stuart Jackson is out there saying, "Evening, Richard and the Veg Army. Hope all is well. Hope you are well too, my friend." We've got Scott out there saying, "Evening all." Excuse me, good evening to you. Turbo Streamers there saying, "Good evening, Veg Podcasters. Good evening to you." Hargrave Gas, evening everyone. Hope you've all had a good start to 2024. Of course, this is the first show of 2024. I've just realised as well. Yeah, hope you've all had a good night, a good start to the year so far. Graham is there saying, "Evening everyone, good evening to you." We got Turbo Stream saying, "Blooming Nora, we've had 3-day dry days this weekend. Allotments still completely saturated though. I know how you feel." Anna Jones is out there saying, "Evening gardeners, good evening to you." We've got Graham Bolton saying, "I know that feeling," to Turbo Stream. Rebecca Hawkins, good evening everyone, good evening to you. Turbo Stream says, "I've never seen the ground so wet. Will take months to dry out." I've just, there we go. Chili Phil was saying, "Good evening from the Chilies. Good evening to you." Graham's was flooded. We've got a picture of that coming up later on. Stu Jackson is saying, "It's going to be one of them nights, I think. We're here, thanks. Still got water in the greenhouse underfoot." Yeah, I think it is going to be one of those nights. Gary is out there saying, "Hi everyone, good evening. RE storm damage. My brassica cage was blown around quite a bit. That's not good at all." We have got Turbo Stream says, "The only bit of gardening I've done is to cut the hellebore leaves off in my home garden." I'm just waiting for the computer to get everything fired up and I'll go back onto there. Anna Jones is saying, "About a third of my garden is underwater. Had enough of this rain." I know how you feel. I know how you feel indeed. Stuart Jackson says, "Please remember to hit the like button or like the page feed." And Richard Golding says, "Hi all." Thank you very much, everyone. Lovely to see you. So I'm hoping the computer is just going to boot up any second now. It's coming on. It's coming on. I'm just hoping it's not going to turn itself off again, which is really, really annoying when it happens. But yeah, been a good week. Obviously, we've had a lot of rain this week, I think it's safe to say. I don't know what it was like where you were, but we had a lot of rain come through. It hasn't really done any damage here at the Veg Ground Podcast, but we are making the most of it nonetheless. The storm didn't do any damage either. But what was interesting, I went down the allotment today and we actually had ice in the puddles. It's the first time this year, or this winter I should say, since last year, that we've actually had a freezing weather. So it's kind of interesting to see what has happened. But the rain, yeah, rain is a bit of a problem. So we'll make the most of it nonetheless. Andrew Norris has joined, said evening gang. Jenny has said we still have field runoff going into the gun, but the allotment is all good. Bethany is saying evening all, sorry I am late. Hargrave Gas said I had a couple of cold frames blown around and broken a bit, just cheap ones, so not so quite light, unfortunately. That's the trouble with the cheap light ones, they do get blown around rather easily. Turbo Stream says computer says no, we're still waiting. It doesn't like it when it's cold. I really shouldn't do this in a shed in the winter, should I? Because it just doesn't like it when it gets cold. Graham says shouldn't be any hosepipe bans this year. There will be. There will be. Turbo Extreme says no actual storm damage from what I can see. And Jenny says I'm so happy. The Allotment Society chairs agreed to my wish list of things. Done, changed to the plot. So happy. If anybody wants to know more about that, go check it out in the Facebook group. Hopefully we are on the Facebook group. I can't see anything that says we are at the moment. Right, so let's get into today's conversation. And this is, I want to hear your tips for allotment holders. We've got a few new people in, well, I say new people. We always welcome new people, of course, to the group. If you are watching, you've never joined in before, please do feel free to say something and join us. We don't bite, we like to encourage you. But we've also got a few older members that have just started up with their first allotment, and they're after a few tips on what to do with an allotment. So that's the subject. I want to hear your tips for an allotment, and I'm stylizing or going back to what I would say to somebody who has just started their first allotment. Now, it's not an easy one to get through. God, this computer has been so slow tonight. Not an easy one to share tips on, is it? Because there's a lot going on an allotment. There's a lot of things to do. And first time you take on an allotment, you usually get a little book with a load of rules, which seem incredibly scary at first. But what I always say, the first thing I would do whenever I take on an allotment, or whenever I've taken an allotment in the past, is just walk around and see what we have already there. Quite often there's quite a few plants, there's quite a few little items that are still out there that do us the world of good. For example, when I took on my allotment, we had raspberries, we had rhubarb already growing, so I made a note of where they were and kept those, and then I wanted to make note of, draw a rough sketch and make a note of everything that I wanted to do. The truth is, in the first year, I think the first year is more of a learning curve. God, hurry up, computer. The first year is a bit of a learning curve. It's a chance for us to kind of walk around and see or learn how our allotment reacts with what we do in our growing season. So you get an idea of what will grow well and what won't, and then make a plan from there. So I would say just don't rush into growing everything. But of course, you've got to make sure you hit that the targets. Quite often the council or whoever rents your allotment will say you've got to have a certain amount cultivated by so many weeks or whatever. You've got to hit that, but don't panic about that. But just use the first year to get to know your plot. So what have we got going on? Bethan has joined and says one of my window panes got broken on my greenhouse and a few homemade cloches got blown over and needed fixing, but not too bad. Could have been a lot worse. That's very good to hear. Jenny says was a notification to say that we were live on Facebook. Excellent. I think the cold weather just really, the computer really doesn't like cold weather, does it? Digwell says it all depends where you are from, where your water comes from. This is with regards to somebody mentioned in hosepipe bans earlier. No problem with reservoirs, but river extraction will be the same as usual in the summer. Digwell, of course, used to work in the water board, so he has a good idea of how it all works. This is just doing my head in, this computer. It's trying to connect to StreamYard, but it's just spinning. Stuart says all I have done this week is started sewing for my sales and got the mouse out of my car after a week of having a little friend in a car with me. Bless them. I'm going to close that down and see if we can get in. Yeah, a lot of people are having trouble with mices. I know that much, but I don't mind them myself. Amanda says the first thing I would do on a new plot is make a comfortable seating area. You know, I think that's something that we often overlook as nice, comfortable seating area on an allotment or in a garden. I think one of the first rules of garden design is that all the paths lead to a seating area. Well, it looks like we're about to get into StreamYard. All paths lead to a seating area because that's where you sit down, relax, and don't underestimate the value of sitting down and looking at your garden and taking note of what's going on. We've got Stuart Jackson says, myself and another villager would like to set up an allotment of village gardens, so all advice welcome. Thank you. Well, a good idea, setting up a community garden. Something I would like to do as well. So interesting. Digra says it takes 40 years for the rain in the hills around Bath to reach the Roman baths in the town. There we go. My hand hurts after a while holding this. I'm trying to get this a bit more comfortable for me and you, of course. Turbo Stream says a tip for new allotment holders is not to try and be like the other plot holders that have been doing it for 60 years. That's actually a very good tip, I think, because there's so many people that look at these other allotments. They've been on there for years. You know, it's no good comparing yourself to those because, well, it all takes a lot of time to get there, and if they've been there for 60 years, they've built up the soil. They've done a lot of good for 60 years building up that allotment. And Jenny says, Digwell, our reservoir is over the main road, been closed for days. I never know it to do that before. The nature reserve has all been underwater for some days. Someone said the fish are all over the road. It happens, doesn't it? It does happen. So just moving my hand again. If I'd known this was going to be like this, I would have done this indoors. This is very, very annoying. Greg says, my 2 tips would be try some no dig in one area for something instant and easy, and the other to think about areas that don't get winter sun to avoid these for things like garlic, overwintered onions and leeks. Yeah, certainly thinking about your allotment, as I said earlier, that first year I feel is a chance to get to know your allotment site, get to know your soil, get to know where your sun is in that first year, and then make your plans after that. Just my opinion there. Graham says, working out where north, east, south and west are on your plot regarding what areas will get more sun or more shade. Yep, that's exactly right. Working out what areas do what and going from there. Valerie Pritchard, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're not normally like this. It's normally done a bit more sort of professionally. It's just got a computer playing around. But she says our water is mostly from boreholes in my part of Norfolk. No hosepipe ban in years. Excellent stuff. I always think that hosepipe bans are kind of unnecessary in some ways because of how much water, in my opinion, is wasted. Us gardeners don't tend to do it so much, but there's a lot of people who would say not to capture so much rainwater. Scott says, a mistake I made when I first took on my allotment was not leaving enough space between some of the beds. Now I leave enough space to comfortably get down and weed. Actually, that is a mistake that I made as well. When I first built my allotment beds, I made it so the paths were small. So I had more growing space. And this was a big mistake because it meant I couldn't get things like my wheelbarrows down the paths, or just, I mean, I'm size 12, I wear size 12 shoes, so I'm quite big footed anyway, and I could just about fit my feet down the paths, and that was a big mistake, something that I would wish I'd never made before. Just trying again with this, but we live and learn. Definitely making sure we have enough space. I would say 60 centimeters of space between paths is important. Belly Cillian says, best allotment tip I can give is go to the plot and find out the direction of the sunrise and set. Absolutely. That comes down to that north, south, east and west is a very good thing. Digwell says, don't bow to peer pressure. I agree with that. Yes. Don't bow to peer pressure because there's a lot of people that will tell you what to do, especially when you first take on your allotment. They will tell you you need to do this, you need to do that. And I don't think it's necessarily right. Your allotment is your allotment. You make it what you want it to be. And if anybody else isn't happy with it, providing, of course, you stick within the rules that some allotment sites have, oh, we're in luck. We're in luck. But providing that, you should be okay with regards to that. Right, I'm just going to try something. To stage. We'll move from stage. And what have you. I'm hoping this is going to work a bit better. Let me know in the comments if that is working well. Right, Turbo Stream says, my allotment neighbour has worked his plot since 1960. He has the neatest and most productive plot on the site. Well, there you go. That just goes to show that you need to spend a bit of time on it to get it right. And don't bow down to peer pressure. I'm just checking. Can everybody hear and see me okay? Now I've switched over. Jenny says, I have nearly finished my drawn to scale plan for my new plot. I've been quizzing the neighbours' plot holders. My allotment will be so different to all of the other plots. I'm breaking the mould. Yeah, drawing a plot plan, good idea as well. But what I like about that is you're asking your neighbours' plot, your neighbouring plot holders. And that's actually probably a very good tip too to get everyone thinking as well. If you have your neighbours, they might have been on there for a bit longer than you have. They may well have a few ideas of what works well when you're on an allotment site than what you have. So yeah, just seeing. Oh, Graham says volume very low compared to using the phone. I thought it looked low when I was testing things earlier. Just going to try something. See if that makes it. That makes it a bit better, doesn't it? Now I know what the problem was there. I just feel the sound quality is not quite good. Right, let's get on with this. Scott says, good tip, avoiding allotment guilt by comparing yourself to others. A very good tip. What have we got there? Digwell says, also work out prevailing wind direction so you know where to pop beans, etc. Yes, wind. Especially with this last week, we've all had, or last few weeks really, we've all had this wind problem where weather has just blown a lot through our allotments and cause damage. So trying to put up windbreaks and things like that is something to bear in mind as well. Chilly Phil says, definitely make plans and don't be afraid to change them. Good tip, good tip. What about version 4 or 5 now? All little changes, but done to make improvements as we learn and go along. Completely. Again, this comes back to what I was saying at the beginning about spending the first year just learning about your plot, not rushing in and setting your plans set in stone. But yeah, definitely feel free to change things as you go. What works, what doesn't work. Again, I come back to the fact that when I first built my allotment, I gave myself 30 centimetre paths, trying to make the most of every bit of space. Turned out it was too small. So when I rebuilt or changed things around, I was much happier giving myself that 60 centimetres of space for paths. Andrew says, first time allotment tip, grow something simple and satisfying. It's easy to be discouraged when stuff doesn't grow. Yeah, don't be, I mean, I personally see when things go wrong, failures, they're not a failure, they're a learning curve. So it may not work one year, it may work the next year, and you find out why it worked. So don't think of it as a failure. It's a learning curve. Jenny says, I've tracked the sun's path, the prevailing winds, and enough room for my walking aid. Also a space to sit, etc., etc. Jenny's right on it. Jenny's one of those I said has got herself a new allotment and is starting to build it now. So a lot going on there. Stu says, one thing I was told was to cover the ground as you clear to stop the weeds coming back before you need space. That's actually a tip I have heard before. Yes, when you take on an allotment, normally it's quite weedy. And you start clearing things out, start removing all the weeds. The idea being you cover it over with, say, weed suppressant membrane or cardboard. Once you cleared it out, then you haven't got to worry about those weeds coming back so much. Prefer it if you, of course, plant plants in there and you run around with the hoe. But what I always say, and when it comes to clearing out weeds on a new allotment, start at the same place and work back. So you're always seeing what you've already done, and you're always starting in the same place. So it gets easier as you go further back. There's nothing more annoying than starting in 1 week in one area, clearing loads of weeds. The next week you go to another area and clear a load of weeds, and you come back to that first area in the next week and it's covered in weeds again. So constantly going through what you've already done first helps too. Toby Stream, my second tip is grow what you like to eat. Very good tip. Don't waste your time growing stuff you don't like. Very, very good tip as well. Bethan says, just tackle a bit of ground at a time. Don't try to clear the whole plot. Just do a bit at a time. Yeah, it comes back to what we were saying. Tackle a bit at a time and work forwards. Work backwards, sorry, I should say. Idaho Garden Girls joined and saying hello to everyone. Hello to you. Nicola's there. Ballysoon, there is an app you can use to do that. Talking about, I think that was about following the wind things. What else have we got? Bristol Veggie Garden says, growing the style you like, not what everyone else does. Yeah, again, that comes back to peer pressure. Yeah, it comes back to peer pressure, etc., etc., and what we were saying. I'm just seeing it got up. Yeah, the volume better. That's much better. Nicholas says it's very fuzzy for me. Well, everybody else is okay, so there we go. I'm just catching up with it now. Toby Stream says, keep the committee happy by regularly working the plot. One visit a month won't be enough in the summer, and you will get letters. Yes, I agree with that. I sort of say when it comes to an allotment, you want to really get down there every day, even if it's only for 20-30 minutes. Obviously, at this time of year, it's not so important. At least once a week at this time of year. But come March to, say, October, I personally try and get down to my allotment every day, 20-30 minutes on the way home from work, just doing a bit of weeding and then a bit more time at the weekend. And it keeps the committee happy. They're seeing you work in the plot. That's all they really want to see, is people work in the plot. None of this sort of none of this sort of half in, half out efforts. It's funny, isn't it, how the committee can be. They just want to see people put in some effort. Nicholas says, being on the exposed side of the hill, wind comes from all directions. Indeed. Toby Stream says, my allotment friend told me to plant one for me, one for the wildlife, and one for friends. It's a good bit of advice. Digwell's making a joke. I've been growing radish for 5 years now. I'm ready to try something else this year. I love radish. Love radish. Love radish. Digwell says, cover the ground. Exactly what 3 newbies did not do last year, and now looking at the plot say the same when they first took them on. Absolutely. Andrew says, we had a great first year with parsnips after Digwell, after which nothing really came up. Digwell says, turn it down. It sounds very southern. Yeah. And Nicholas says, so glad I don't have the committee to worry about. Indeed. So let's get back into the tips. As I said, my tip is to try and make a trip to the allotment at least once a week during the winter, but daily during the summer. 20 minutes, half hour is all it takes to keep on top of the weeds. And when it's broken down like that, it's not so difficult. So let's say we do half an hour every day through Monday to Friday. That's 2.5 hours spent on the allotment a week already. I might spend another 4 hours on the allotment on a Saturday. Sunday, I might have the day off, or I might pop down there for another half hour. If let's say I do half hour on a Sunday, that's 7 hours a week spent on my plot. And that has really helped keep the allotment very, very tidy. One of the other things to bear in mind with it all, an allotment is a privilege, and we are lucky if we have allotments. We are lucky enough to be allowed to use an allotment, so it is a privilege. We want to make the most of it. There are people who are begging for allotments and would love that bit that you are having, so you've got to make the most of it. But don't feel the committee is out to get you. They don't want to kick you off any more than you want to be kicked off. They want you to use it, but they have to keep everybody happy at the same time. Yeah, and Turbo Extreme says mulch the areas you aren't using yet. Good advice. We all like a bit of mulch. Now I'm going to put up one of my, I tell you what, I've got a great little video that has been sent in from the Chili's, which I really like this video. As we said, take a photo at the beginning of every year and we'll pull it together at the end of the year to see a compilation. Kate's done. Oh, sorry, you called me. Just checking everything on the phone for a minute there. I will come back to that in a moment. I've got more videos to go through as well in just a moment. Where were we going? So Turbo Extreme says, I usually go to the plot 3 times a week for 2 to 3 hours each time. That works just as well. I say daily because I feel that a daily visit for half an hour is easy to achieve. But if you know, I think the point that we're all trying to make is that you can't just go to an allotment once a month and expect it to work. You've got to put effort in. Our allotment site said that you have to spend at least 4 hours a week maintaining the allotment, and I would agree with that, especially on my site. Jenny says, I'm adding as many wildlife habitats as possible. Dead hedge, pond lagoons for hoverflies, insect hotels, nettles in pots, bird bath and feeders. What I would say when it comes to wildlife habitats, put a sign up saying it is a wildlife habitat. Some allotment committees will come along and think it's just messy. If you put a sign up and they see it's a wildlife habitat, they can say, oh, that's what it is for. This is the trouble I feel sometimes with committees. If they're not talking to you and seeing what you're doing, they're going on what they expect to see, and you may have different ideas. So sometimes a little sign just saying nettles for butterflies or something like that does help them out quite a lot. Graham says, don't leave expensive tools in sheds. Yes, allotments are very much the type of place where things will get stolen. They're easy pickings. They're not usually that well secure. There's no security on site. Anybody can get in the middle of night and steal some tools. So not leaving expensive tools, I totally agree with that. I tend to buy all my cheap tools from a what do you call it? A car boot for the allotment. They're still perfectly good, but my cheap tools, I base it that I'm happy. Any tools I leave on the allotment, if they get stolen, I'm not too fussed about. It's a bit of an inconvenience, but it is what I can live without. Digwell says, lovely chili guys. Indeed, it was a lovely video, wasn't it? Scott says, a good tip is to attract wildlife in as much as possible. Totally agree. Wildlife is far better for slug and snail, pest control, anything like that. Please do encourage wildlife in as much as possible. Stuart says, great little video, Kate. I wish my garden looks that good. Turbo Stream says, great pics of the change there, Chile. Indeed. Bethan says, great videos, Chile. Jenny says, great video. Jenny says, I'll make some signs. Yeah, only because I've known people to have had that problem. What else have we got? Nicholas says, my tip would be to have some lovely flowers to enjoy, good all round for you to pick and take home, for the bees pollinating and insects that eat black fly and green flies, etc. Pond for frogs, loads to eat slugs. Again, coming back to bringing in nature and things like that. Now, one of the questions that was posed last week with regards to this is that if you were to start your allotment again, what would you do differently? And this is actually a very good question. One thing that I wish I had done when I first took on my allotment, more on the original half though. The top half, it's not so bad. But on the original half, I wish I had dealt with the couch grass much earlier or much better when I first took on the plot. I went down the no dig route, which, don't get me wrong, is fantastic and is the way forward. But the couch grass that I have on the allotment just grows and grows and grows, no matter how much I try and hoe it off, try and mulch it. I really should have removed all those little bits of grass. And we are getting there with it. There is a bit of a knack to it, I've discovered. The top half of a plot, it's not so bad. But what I wish I had done is just covered the whole lot in weed membrane and grown on pots on top for the first year to get rid of that couch grass. But the asparagus bed is the real problem for it. The asparagus hates weeds, and I wish I'd just spent a lot of time removing all the weeds from that asparagus bed before planting out my asparagus. I'm paying for it now. We are getting there. There's a lot of things that we are doing to try and combat it, but I just wish I'd spent a lot more time removing weeds in the beginning. I know what I was worried about. I was worried about those targets that you have to hit from cultivation and things like that. I don't think I needed to worry, to be honest with you. So what is being said in the comments? So Kate Spratt has joined, saying hello all, good evening to you. We have got Scott saying a fab video. Log pile for hedgehogs, yes, another good one. Or for encouraging those wildlife in. I find hedgehogs actually like to go underneath my shed, so I try and leave, like my shed, I put on like beams, but I leave some areas for hedgehogs to get underneath to get in there. But yeah, log pile for hedgehogs as well. Dead hedge made from branches cut down. And Turbo Stream says, I made a cottage flower border right next to the shed. A great place to sit with a cuppa or watching the bees. Indeed. I think definitely having a place to sit is a top tip. Nicholas says, put weed suppressant down on paths under wood chip, not just cardboard. Now, I'm not a fan of weed suppressant. I used to use it a lot, and I still do have some that I still do use. But the reason that I'm not a big fan of it, particularly on allotments, is that often it gets buried underneath everything, forgotten about. And then when somebody comes along to try and, after you, to try and grow in that same area, they come across this weed suppressant that's that far in the ground and causes issues. So I'm not a fan of weed suppressant. It does have a place. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I'm not a fan of it. And you will see a little bit later on that my neighbours used weed suppressor membrane on their allotment as well. And one winter, it got blown over into my gooseberries. And in my gooseberries, I've got these tiny little strands of plastic, which are a real problem. You'll see that in the video a little bit later on. So weed suppressant does have its place, but if you use it, just think carefully about the effects of it. Personally, I just use cardboard and then we'll mulch on top of that. But that's me. Nicholas says, I've helped weed some of your grass in beds when I visited. Yes, yes. Yes, Nicola has, and you saw how much of it, and like 2 weeks later, it was back. It was that bad. So, yeah, it's not an easy one to deal with. Graham says, be careful when you leave your seeds or the rats will have them. Graham's just had this problem this week. Luckily enough, Digwell stepped in to help him. There's a good thing going on in the Facebook group. I watch what's going on in there, but I want everybody else to talk more than I do. In the Facebook group, that is. But it's great to see everyone. Somebody needs help. People have stepped in to help. That's another good top tip, actually, isn't it? 2 tips there. 1, don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. 3, make friends with gardeners because they will help you out when needed as well. Nicola recommends to Graham about putting seeds in tins. Scott says, I would have covered areas for a year like I did with my second area if it got rid of weeds. But I was the same. I didn't want it to look like I wasn't doing anything with the plot. Yes, exactly. That was my big mistake. I was so worried about the letters saying that you're not tending to the plot. When I took on the second half of the plot, that's literally what I did. I covered it over for a year and I don't get anywhere near as many problems as I do on that top half, on that second half of the plot compared to the first half. Yeah, it does make a big difference, doesn't it? Now, there is one thing that I usually would recommend when it comes to vegetable gardening, and on an allotment site, we kind of need this as well. It's water. And my normally top tip was pot up some rainwater butts as soon as possible. The reason being that when it rains, which we've had a lot of lately, as many of you will attest to with all the flooding that's going on some allotment sites, but we want to capture some of that rainwater to use in the summer as much as possible. I personally think it's crazy that rain goes down the drains, falls on our roofs, goes down the drains and out to sea, where we could be using it for things like flushing the toilet or watering the garden or washing the car. I'm expecting a few people to chime in on this. So I would also say getting a rainwater butt set up as quickly as possible is a positive thing. That being said, I'm actually considering getting rid of my water butts on my allotment. Shock horror, I know. Reason being is I don't use the water butts enough on there. We're only allowed 2 per plot, and I don't use them enough for it to be worth, or they empty far too quickly when I'm using them on the allotments. And we have water piped in through from the water board onto our site. So I'm actually thinking of getting rid of my water butts. I'm not entirely certain just yet, but I'm thinking of getting rid of them for that reason. Nicholas says, use an old metal filing cabinet to store seeds, feeds, etc. Also metal drawers. I've just brought 2 narrow drawer units this week and I have an old filing cabinet. Funny enough, I've got an old filing cabinet just down here for all my plant feeds and things as well. And what you may know I also do when it comes to plant feeds, if I get one out of this, if I can get it out, that is. There we go. It's a perfect one that I was talking about. What I also do when it comes to my plant feeds is I put them in these sort of juice containers, as they call them. The cardboard boxes that most plant feeds come in like this is a potato fertilizer. When it gets damp, when it gets cold, it deteriorates quite quickly and becomes useless. So I find decanting them into these plastic bottles makes it easy. Plus, when it comes to the time that you want to add them to the garden, I mean, this is not a good example because something has actually been chewing on the top of these. But when it comes to the time that you want to put them in the garden, you just sprinkle them around, making sure that doesn't go in my coffee. Sprinkle it around. You don't actually then have to touch it, which means you haven't got then so much worry about washing your hands afterwards or anything like that. Just a little bit safer, a little bit more convenient, and a little bit better. Yeah, good thing there. Good thing indeed. Nicholas says rats will eat pelleted feeds. Indeed, that's what's happened to the top of that, as you can see. She also says, I watched Simplified Gardening, and I think he has 21 IBC tanks. He's very lucky to be allowed that many. We're only allowed 2 water butts. IBC tanks are not allowed on the allotment either. But it just goes to show how much water you really need to water an allotment or a home plot. At home, I've got 18 water butts now, and that's just about enough for my home garden. I could do with a bit more just to give me a little bit more leeway. Plenty of rainwater around at the moment, isn't there? So we've got to make the most of it while we can. Graham says, I have filled an IBC tank, 1,000 litre, and 4 water drums of 220 litres. We have water in taps, but only use that in an emergency, to be honest. If you've got no restrictions, and you can have many water butts as possible, I think it's great. Because we're only allowed 2 per plot, that would give us 440 litres to last a year. It's just not good enough. Rainwater better for seeds. I wouldn't say that. I personally don't think rainwater is better for seeds, but it's better for plants once they are growing. Digwell also says on that note, don't use stored water for seeds or seedlings. Can be full of nasties like damping off and funguses, etc., etc. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Apparently I'm frozen. Can you hear me? Are you okay? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Moving again, Stuart says. I just said I saw it frozen. Nicholas says, Jess lost her seeds due to chemicals in water supply at her house. Oh, okay, now, Richard. Chemical, that's, I mean, again, Digwell, I'm going to bow down to Digwell's superior knowledge because he actually worked in this industry. Never heard of that before. Most advised to use it because of chlorination. If it's safe to drink, it's safe to your plants. That's what I would say. Nicholas says, I'm having a borehole dug this year. That's a great way to go forward, isn't it? A borehole. That would be great. Graham says, I use pure water for my built-in purifier for that in the house for seeds, etc. Excellent. And then Gary says, sorry, I've been in and out of conversation tonight. This is a busy time getting the kids sorted for school tomorrow. I worried so much about collecting water reserves, I was reluctant to use it. That defeats the point. You've got to use it. You've got to use it. I know what you mean. I did get like that sometimes, but the way I like to think of it, if you can use your water reserves first, you can always fall back on tap water should you need it afterwards. But yeah, I am with you there too. Digwell says they've been doing work and I think they flushed out with chemicals. Don't know what happened to Jess there, but it can happen, I guess. Ian says, done it again, didn't get a notification, so late again. Lovely to see you anyway. You know, we go live every Sunday at 6. I don't know what's going on with the notifications. That's out of my hands. Right, let's go to one of my videos. As we're talking about allotments, let's go to my pruning video. Right, guys, you set me a mission this week to prune a blackcurrant bush while doing a sun dance. So I'm going to do a bit of dancing while doing this. Now behind me is the blackcurrant bush. Bit of history on this particular bush. I inherited this when I took on this half of the allotment. It's at the very top, which has always been a very tricky area for me to control. But I've not wanted to remove this plant. It actually produces quite well, but to be honest, I've never given it any care. So, when it comes to pruning, the first thing I always look for is any dead, diseased or damaged branches, the 3 Ds. There's no dead or diseased branches on this particular plant, but I can see there is one particular branch where it has been rubbing against each other, which is what I want to remove first. And this is that branch. As you can see, it's been rubbing, it's looking crap. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go right back as far as I can go and just cut that off. In fact, that was actually rotten at the base. Let me show you what I'm talking about there. So that was no good anyway. So what we're going to do now is prune away any branches that are too old. Now, blackcurrant's fruit on wood that tends to be 2-3 years old, and you can normally tell these by them being a darker material. The lighter material is normally the younger. We want to leave some of that younger stuff for future growth. But anything older than 5 years old probably won't fruit, so we need to remove some of this older branches. Now for me, this particular bush has been a bit troublesome to try and keep tidy, so I am going to give it a very harsh prune. Let's get on with it, shall we? Right, that's got that blackcurrant bush now pruned and should make it easier for me to manage in the future. Now what's interesting, as I was pulling out some of these branches, some of them had actually started layering themselves. That's where a plant puts out branches, it gets in contact with the ground and starts to reproduce and grow another plant. I'm going to keep hold of those and try and see if we can get those to produce some more blackcurrant bushes. Now, one thing I should say is when you're cutting, try and cut at a 45-degree angle. That way any water drips off, just makes it mean that the plant is less likely to get infected. And also you want to try and go back to a bud so that it regrows. Very, very complicated thing to explain, but you get the idea. Now in doing this, I've noticed that my gooseberry bush to the side, that has always been a bit of a problem. A few years ago, my neighbour's black membrane got wrapped around it, and it's been impossible to get rid of it. But there's also other plants that are too close, and I'm thinking I need to get rid of that gooseberry bush. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments what you think about that gooseberry bush, and also anything that you want to add about how you go about growing or pruning blackcurrant bushes. Right guys, back to the studio. I seem to be back in the screen now. I don't know how well that was working for everybody. I was having a lot of issues, so I've just talked to myself to try and keep it all going. Yeah, so I was pruning my blackcurrant bush as you guys set for this week's mission. Need a mission for next week, and I'd love to hear your ideas on it. But as you can see, that blackcurrant bush is in desperate need of a good prune. We're going to probably do a few more like it. I think it's going to do it the world of good this year. Certainly going to improve the blackcurrants. There was a few comments that came in during that. Where were it? Nicola says, when it comes up, I use a lot. Will it come up? I use a lot with my ducks. I don't know if it's working or not now. Can you hear me and see me okay? I'm assuming so. Nothing seems to be responding at the moment to me, so I'm just going to hold it off. But yeah, that was my blackcurrant bush, now pruned and trimmed and ready to go for the growing season. I don't know if anything's working or not. I really don't know. Yeah, hopefully that's going to go on and produce more and more blackcurrants. But the real question at the moment is with regards to that gooseberry bush. Do we get rid of a gooseberry bush or not? It's the big question. I'm thinking we're probably going to get rid of it. It would make sense. But what do you think? Should I get rid of it, or should I try and hold it out for a little bit longer? I'm just going to quickly bring up my phone because I can't see anything going on in the comments at the moment. So I just want to see if there's any changes or anything going on. There we go. Here we go. Here we go. You can hear. There we go. There we go. The comments just came in. The signal is just in and out at the moment. So apologies for that. Sundance seems to have worked since, Gary, with the blue sky. It was lovely. It was cold, but it was lovely on the allotment. Stuart says, my Facebook notifications don't always work. That's why I swapped to YouTube. Tomo Stream says, that dance worked. Look at that blue sky. It was so lovely. That blue sky, cold, but lovely. It really did. I was saying through December, I felt really miserable because I wasn't able to get on the allotment. Today, everything just came together and feels great. Chili Cake says, really helpful video, Richard. I put in a new bush last year. Should I prune it at all this year? I would leave it unless you've got any of the 3Ds, dead, diseased, and damaged branches, and any branches that are crossing as well. Just remove those for the first year and then go from there. Digwell says, doing my black currants next week, hopefully. Excellent. Are you going to make a video as well? Ian Beddoe says, will you work that fast if you come and do mine? I'll try, but I can't promise anything. Digwell says, love the twig in the bottle. Gotta have a twig in the bottle, haven't you? Turbo Stream, I have gooseberries to prune this week. Yeah, I'm still debating about the gooseberry plants. I know Graham says, keep the gooseberries. Yeah, I'm debating that as well. Stuart says, frozen. Again, now you're back. Fantastic. I don't know what's going on. Well, I do. It's the signal because the antennas out or whatever the weather does definitely affect it. Bethan says, I also need to prune my soft fruit and raspberry canes this week or in the near future. Weather is looking better this coming week, so look forward to getting some jobs done. Yeah, I've got it. These next 2 weeks, weather looks great, so I'm making the most of it while we can. Nicholas says, loving the woolly hat. I often put off cuts from blackcurrants pruning straight in the ground. Most take. Yes, it can happen. Again, I'm sort of, do I really need that many blackcurrants is my question, but we will see on that. Jenny says, I have got to prune my tabby right back. I'll never get in the car to take to the plot if I don't. Do it. Do it. The tabries are pretty hardy plants. They do benefit from a good cutting right back. Tabries are delicious as well. Let's see what happens. Digwell says, I use my trimmings as pea sticks. They rooted. Yes, I've just cut my hazel tree down for the same thing, and I'm making sure that before we use them, they spend a bit of time in the air before they go in the ground for that very reason. Well, gooseberries would cover if you gave it a really hard prune. Possibly. It's just that gooseberry is so close to the thornless blackberry, and I want to keep the thornless blackberry is where I'm debating about it. And it's really messy underneath as well, and it's difficult to tidy it out. We'll see. Toby Stream says, I use a bottle of tap water to water seedlings that has stood for a few days. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you're moving again. It must be the cold weather. It is the cold weather affecting the signs. So there we go. Ian says, Happy New Year. I will start pruning my client's apple trees this week. Any chance on a video of that, Ian, from the expert himself? Turbo Stream says, I rooted a red currant cutting. I gave it to my cousin this week, travelling back up to Carlisle. That's what I'm hoping to do with those ones that have layered. Trying to grow layers and see how we get on with that. As I said, I've still got a red currant bush to prune as well. I'm just debating about the gooseberry. I'm leaning towards getting rid of it, I'll be honest with you. Nicholas says, need to prune gooseberries like a bowl shape. Not sure if it's the same for black currants, etc. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to black currants, you want 7 or 8 stems sort of creating that goblet shape, ideally. It's not always that easy to do in reality. As you saw with that one, it was going here. So it was a bit, the branches were going there, and everywhere. And I wanted it to be more open like that, more goblet shaped. So you get an open center, as Digwell says as well. 7 or 8 stems is what you're really looking for going up and get that goblet shape. As I said, I inherited it. I haven't really looked after it, so it was a good chance to give it a really hard prune. well, I say really hard prune. It wasn't that bad severe in the end, but chance to open it up and see how it gets on. And I think gooseberries are the same. I'm just debating at the moment with that gooseberry plant. So don't forget to set a mission for next week, a challenge that you want me to do. We've still got one more video to come along, as well as your photos, provided, of course, they all work quite well. I think the signal has just came back. I'll be glad when this warmer weather comes along. So yeah, I'm looking for a mission. Also looking for any more tips that you would share for anybody on their allotment. I certainly think that pruning is a good tip because it does really look after your plants much better. And in the case of my hazel tree, for example, and I spoke about this on the podcast a few weeks ago, I coppiced that, which is a type of pruning where I cut everything down to just above ground level. The idea being, one, I get hazel sticks for my beans, but two, it actually prolongs the life of the tree. A tree can last longer with decent pruning. And with fruit trees, they produce better, and bushes for that matter, they produce better when they are pruned as well. So it's a very important thing to do. It's one of those things, I think, when it comes to pruning, it is, you've got to be brave, because it is quite a nerve-wracking thing, isn't it, pruning? You've got to be brave. Stuart says, we have raspberries at schools. Would they be okay facing against the south-facing wall? Thanks to you. Yes, they will be absolutely fine. They may not be as sweet, but they will be fine where they are. Are they summer or autumn raspberries? Graham says, hang on, hit the like button, please, guys. Yeah, please do hit that like button. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, or click the notifications so that you know when we go live. Ian says, difficult to hold a pruner and film at the same time as my trees are big. Some I have to climb into. That'll be, just put the video behind you. We'll see you climbing into this tree. It'll be a good laugh. Only if you want to, of course. Gary says, mission suggestion, research a gooseberry variety to replace the old plant and prepare a space for it to go. Okay, that could work. I do have 3 other gooseberry plants on the allotment and 2 gooseberry plants here at home. So I was thinking to get rid of it because I don't really need it. That's kind of the deciding thing. Bethan says, why are you thinking of getting rid of your gooseberry bush? Sorry if you said this earlier. I'm being distracted with children. Not a problem. The reason I'm thinking of getting rid of that gooseberry, one, it's a very ugly, scraggly looking bush. I inherited it. It was already in a bad state, and I never really done anything with it other than harvest gooseberries. It needs a decent prune. It got the bits of plastic weed suppressor membrane wrapped around lots and lots of different branches that are very difficult to remove. Underneath it is very difficult to try and tidy up as well, because all the branches are growing in a crazy place. And as I said, I've got plenty of other gooseberry bushes in other locations. That's making me think I don't really need this one. So that is where I am at with it. We don't really eat that many gooseberries either, and we end up freezing quite a few of them. So that's where I'm wondering, well, do we need it? Because I could dig it out, and then I also say right next to it, about that far away from it, is a thornless blackberry. Again, not planted by me. This thornless blackberry I'm keeping because it is the sweetest tasting blackberries I've ever had, and I want to keep that growing and make the most of it. So that's why I'm keeping it. Idaho says, yes, have to be brave when pruning. Completely agree. You have to be brave, but once you do it, it makes sense. Toby Stream says, I would hack the gooseberry back and take a few cut-ins. Good idea. That's an idea. Stuart says, we have both summer and autumn fruit, but hopefully going to get more plants this year. Okay. Different pruning techniques with either. Let's see what happens. Bethan says, I get a bit too into pruning. If I'm not careful, there is nothing left. Yeah. And Toby Stream says, he's a hacker too. Nicholas says about that gooseberry, offer it to another plot holder. It's a possibility. It is a possibility. I just come back to the fact it's an ugly looking plant and it's going to need a lot of TLC to really get it back into place. Scott says replace gooseberry with jostaberry, maybe. That's a possibility. Again, we've got it. It might just free up a bit more space for other things. Bethan says, you have made your case. It sounds like you want to get rid of the gooseberry, so get rid. I'll be honest, until today, the thought of getting rid of it never even entered my brain. It was only today when I was looking at it that it has bugged me, and I thought that might be what we do. I normally hate getting rid of any plants. With a passion, I hate getting rid of any plants, but sometimes you have to, don't you? Sometimes you just have to start over again. Time stream. Oh, if you have a glut of gooseberry bushes, then replace it with something else. This is why, yeah. Gooseberry fool, crazy fool. Graham says, if you have others, then get rid, mate. I've also got thornless blackberry that I'm training around the front of my shed. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Exactly what I'm thinking. And then Gary says, sounds like it needs to go 100%. And Digwell says you've got to be cruel to be kind. Indeed. I think you are kind of backing up my thoughts. As I said, I normally hate getting rid of any plants at all, unless they're dead or dying, of course. But this is just not in a decent condition. Yeah, so that's my thoughts. Right, you also sent me the seed to sow this week was celery, and we've been sowing that as well. So let's go see that. Right, guys, it's back to the sow-alongs, and this week we are sowing celery. This is a variety called Giant Red. A little bit early for this variety. It's doing it. Normally, I don't know if it is or not, because it's doing this weird thing again. It just means you haven't got to blanch them. I don't know. This variety, I'm not too sure about. If it is running or not. I'm just sitting here talking to myself because I'm trying to see what is going on. I think I'm figuring out what is the problem. My seed cell that we're going to be using. Just give the seeds a good. I don't know if it is running. I don't know if it is running at all. See what the seeds look like. Now, celery, I do find, does grow for quite a long period. These are the seeds. They're pretty small. So may not be necessarily possible to do in this plug plant like I usually use. May want to do broadcast seeding. But like I said, some of the seeds that we sowed last year are still growing out in my garden. So these are what I class as a long-lasting plant. I reckon they can be in the ground for well up to a year if we sow them now. They do like, when they are growing, lots of water. They do originate from being a coastal plant, so if we don't make sure they get plenty of water, they don't tend to grow so well. Yeah, I should have broadcast sown these, but never mind. We will see how they get on and what happens in the future. What I do like about celery, they are fairly difficult to grow, but when you get them right, it all clicks into place and you will keep getting celery from in the future. So yeah, there we go. I've sown the seed about 1 centimetre deep in these plug plants. They will stay inside this greenhouse, and I'm going to just cover these over gently. I'm not going to scatter any compost on top, and that should do quite well. There we go, 1 tray of celery is sown. We will see how they get on in the future. Right guys, start sharing your tips on how you go about growing celery in the comments. down below. All right, we are back. Sorry about that. We are technical issues today is absolutely crazy. I think you could hear me while that video was running, so I do apologize for that. What I could see was me sitting on the screen, and I don't like dead silence. So yeah, sorry about that. Normally it should cut out my audio when that video plays, so apologies for that. Anyway, got the idea. We've sown the celery. Not saying that's the right way, but it's the way we're trying for this video. It is a little bit early, but nonetheless, we'll give it a try. Ian says, are you getting rid of a gooseberry because it's on its own and fed up with the raspberries getting together and it hates playing the gooseberry? Yes, exactly that. Nicholas says, I'm hoping to get a fruit cage built this year. Maybe I will get some before the backbirds. Yeah. That's why I'm thinking of changing that area to a fruit cage as well. Digwell says, surface sow celery, scatter it on the surface. That's what I would normally do. I decided not to for that one, but I thought I would try it and see how it works out. And then Digwell says a man who cannot grow celery for the life of me. He's talking to himself there as well. Graham says, Nicola, I'm thinking the same, as I've just done 26 blackcurrant cuttings in pot. 26 blackcurrant. You must really like your blackcurrants there as well. But yeah, celery is sown, the first load of celery anyway, and I've got some from last year that we sowed that we're still eating at the moment. Done really, really well with celery last year. Hopefully we're going to hopefully we're going to make the most of it in next year. Right, it's playing there. Turbo Stream says that poor gooseberry bush sat there unaware of its impending doom. It's been there for quite a while. It's had good innings. Gary said, sorry, missed the end of a video. Are you leaving it in the greenhouse or a heated propagator? I'm leaving mine in the greenhouse. They could do with a heated propagator, to be fair, to start them off at this time of year, but in the greenhouse is where I'm leaving mine on that lot anyway. We'll see how it gets on. Celery is my nemesis, says Kate. The closest I got was a planter with them that grew about 2 inches and stopped. So frustrating. I do find the right variety, I mean, the golden self-blanching is a really good one, but they do need a lot of water. Free draining, but really moisture retentive water. It is a coastal plant. Its ancestry does come from the coast. So celery, I think it's a marsh plant, if I remember correctly. It needs a lot of water, and I think that is the secret. It needs a lot of water. Digwell says, I have to talk to myself. No one listens. Indeed. Graham's smiling and laughing. And Gary says, your existing celery looked great. I'm really pleased with my celery. So much of it, more than what we could actually use. But we've just got to try and get into the habit of using it at the moment. But definitely, it's a good one, I think. I mean, I said it needs a lot of water. If you look at the amount of water at the moment, there's plenty of it. Bethan says, I grew celery in 10-litre pots last year. I put 4 plants in each pot. I used 2-litre bottles with top and bottom cut off as a collar around each plant, a hold of soil, and it worked really well. Is there a video on that on your channel, Bethan? Love to see that a bit more. Turbo Stream says, can you prick out celery seedlings? Might give it a go this year. Yes, you can. They don't generally like their roots being disturbed, but you can prick them out. And that's what I did with the load that I grew last year. There we go. Digwell says his celery looks great, but just tastes awful. Admitting defeat, Tesco wins. Did he go a bit too woody? That's usually when it tastes awful. Chili Cake says, I managed to grow celery this year. It doesn't look like anything like the shop, but in the shops, but it tastes good. That's the trouble. Sometimes we're so conditioned to seeing vegetables in shops that what it actually turns out like is nothing like it. and that's always the problem. Scott says, I haven't managed celery yet, but really want to bring in the Fenlands. Fenlands? I should really... Fenland celery is lovely. Oh, yes, of course, celery. I remember him saying about this, Scott, sorry. Celery grows in the wild in his area, and very wet area as well. Gary says, I wonder if Scott has some celery recipes. I'm sure he does, that we might get one day. So we've done the celery, we've done that. Let's have a look at your photos that have came in this week. That's another thing we need to do. Quite a good lot of photos, actually. Lots of photos have gone up in the group, I'm pleased to say. Please do keep them coming. It's always good to see. Now, Scott, he has managed to get some work done on the allotment, starting his no-dig beds. You can see the bed built here, cardboard laid down, and he has filled it up with compost as well. Great stuff. Now, Tanya has built this pallet fence on her allotment. Looks absolutely fantastic, doesn't it? And something I could probably do on my allotment as well, behind the rhubarb, raspberries and the gooseberries we were talking about earlier. Fantastic, fantastic. And I like the fact that they used also for storage with the tubes inside them as well. Great thinking. Stuart Jackson's rhubarb is starting to show. Rhubarbs came out really, really early this year. I know there are some early varieties, but really early this year. Richard, who's in the group tonight, he's got his first allotment. He's very happy. It's not far from me, so I might have to travel down and see how he gets on with it as well. Looks great starting, doesn't it? All that excitement about a new allotment that we've been talking about today. Andy, he is working hard on his allotment. He's only just taken on this allotment a few weeks ago as well. What happened there? You may remember he had a load of carpet from a photo recently as well. Lots going on. He's making some really, really good progress and working hard. Scott's plot shot, as I said, set the homework last week of sharing your plot photos. I did this on the podcast as well. That was his on the 1st of January. Sterling, he's started his seedlings growing under grow lights as well. Looking fantastic too. Good start to the season. Graham, we were talking about flooded allotment. This is his. As you can see, that is a lot of water. He's also lost a lot of seeds to rats this week as well. So he was having a bit of a hard time. But as I've always said, things can only get better. Things will improve. It's just a good chance to have a look and see what needs to be done. Beddoes, he has started off his seeds indoors as well in his, I think this is a hydroponics growing system that seems to be very popular for starting seeds. I keep thinking I should get myself one and see what happens. Anne's plot shot as well on the 1st of January, all the way from Canada, completely covered in snow. We were thinking the flooding looks bad. You imagine having all that snow in your garden as well. What would you prefer? Jenny's plot shot as well from the 1st of January. Her new allotment, looking off to a good start. I think this is the one she's got. There was a bit of debate going on about the second plot, which, by the sounds of it, has been sorted. Kate's plot shot as well from the 1st of January. This is a Chili Kate and Chili Phil's allotment. Well, I think Chili Kate is the one that does most of the work, just to make sure I don't get myself in trouble. Gary's plot shot. Love this one. Very neat and tidy, isn't it? And just goes to show what we're off to. And I believe next, if I'm not mistaken, when it comes up, what's happened here? Oh, it's got stuck. It's got stuck again. I don't know if it's changed for anybody. It hasn't changed for me. If I remember correctly, this is Digwell's plot shot. I'm hoping you are seeing it. This is on his allotment that he's been doing with no dig gardening. And he actually also sent a photo of his neighbour's allotment. Oh, hang on. No, that's wrong. That's his neighbour's allotment, that one there that I was talking about while showing you. And this is his allotment. It was showing off. I say showing off, but it just goes to show the difference that no dig gardening makes. Hopefully you can see those photos okay. Let me know if it hasn't worked. But it goes to show how no dig gardening really does make a difference with water, free draining soil, water retention at the same time. So please do keep sharing those photos. Post them in our Facebook group, send them to me via social media, or email me, richard@theveggiegrowerpodcast.co.uk. That's richard@theveggiegrowerpodcast.co.uk. Hang on, I don't know if it's been removed from the. It's going on a. This is annoying. On a stuck again. I don't know what's going on tonight. If this carries on, we will have to go indoors next week. Oh, damn it. Right, I'm going to carry on and see if we can make the most of it. Where are we? Scott says, I definitely do have a recipe for celery that we were talking about earlier. Hopefully that will come together. We'll hear that in the future. I guess I like celery. It's got a lot of good stuff. Nicola actually says celery juice is good for weight loss. As you know, I'm trying to lose weight at the moment too. Bethan's Kitchen and Garden says, I think I have the celery amongst my container grown videos. I didn't do a specific video on celery, but they are still growing in my greenhouse. So we'll take a photo to show you. Please do. Stuart Jackson says, talking of Scott, I'm really enjoying the recipes on the podcast. Thanks for taking the time. We have started cooking some of them. Thanks again. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Scott, for sending them over. I do put them on the website as well if you want the written article to read and follow too. But yeah, some really good recipes that are coming in there. Nicholas says it uses more energy to eat celery than gain. Yeah, there is some truth to that. But there is a bit of debate at the same time. Again, I'm no nutritionist, so we just take that at face value. Loves Andy's sign updated. Indeed, that was a good one, wasn't it? I'm trying to get rid of that. Nicholas says, try a different variety, dig well. Yeah, please do try. Oh, there we go. It's just catching up now on my screen. Try a different variety, dig well. Yeah, please. That might work, but who knows? Who knows? Turbo Stream says, I'm Graham, I thought my plot was waterlogged. That's bad, that waterlogging, wasn't it? And then Bethan says, Paul Graham, what an awful start to the new year. As Richard says, things can only get better. Graham does say that was just part of it, mate. And Digwell says, we've tried the different varieties, tried 4 lots now, but I may do it Bethan's way as a last-ditch effort. Indeed. Graham, no, I've read Graham's, haven't I? Rob's Allotment Gardening has joined and says, good evening all. Good evening to you. Hope you are well. A lot of people saying hello to Rob. Gary says, it's back on you. Yeah, signal issues are becoming a nightmare tonight. What did I see? You only saw Digwell's plot briefly and then his neighbours. So I'm a bit reluctant to show it off again because it seems to be whenever I do that is when we get issues. So we'll, if you want to see it, I'll get Digwell to post the 2 photos in the Facebook group and they can go from there. GK says, feels arguing that he came to the plot with me for 5 minutes today, but he's miffed that he didn't share his beloved chili bed on the front garden. I have to be a bit selective with photos, otherwise I end up with way too many. But they're all in the Facebook group and they are great. And I think I did the chili bed last week, actually, didn't I? I did the chili bed last week, so I have shown it. I do remember that. I did it last week. Yeah. Graham says, Nicola, I need to dig all mine out as fast as they are starting to rot. I'm not sure what he's talking about there. Turbo Stream says, keep calm and carry on. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. Stuart says, love the pictures. Well done all. Great pictures, everyone. Says Kate. Great pics, everyone. Idaho says, thank you for the pictures. It is inspiring. And so on. So on. Nicholas says, think I'd rather have it snow as it insulates rather than water that can affect the soil. A lot of decisions going on there, isn't there? Graham says, good idea, mate. Turbo Stream. If I get a plot next door as well, I'm potting a lake in. Good for growing rice is something, I would say. Rob's Allotment Guns saying, I just sowed my chilies today. I've made a second sowing of chilies this week as well, funny enough. My first load of chilies got eaten by slugs or snails. So I've made a second sowing, as well as aubergines too. But my sweet peppers and aubergines are doing really, really well. Chili Phil says, I took the photo after you set the homework on the last live. I'll get over it. Right. I would remember it for next week just to make sure nobody is upset. Meant with love. Meant with love. I'm writing, as you see in my comments, is in real time, which is pointless. Sorry, you went back to Steve, so we had a good look, and it was great, as were all the photos. Thanks, no problem. It's challenging this week, isn't it? We sowed ours this week, Rob, too, says Chili Kate. Right, guys, we have got a few minutes to go. So if anybody's got any last-minute allotment tips that they want to get in, please do go ahead. I was trying to rack my brains and think of any top tips that I have, particularly for new allotments. And I think I've gone through all mine. I certainly think taking your time, don't feel rushed. Make sure you work little and often, or work often, but little and often really does work. As I said, half hour a day in the summer, or March to November, makes all the difference. And don't feel you have to keep up with the neighbours or anything like that. Do it at your own pace. It is your allotment. Just make sure you stick within the rules. Trying to think, was there anything, any other tips or any other tips that anybody wants to share? Now, we need a mission for next week, and there was discussion about this gooseberry bush. That could be something that we do. Also, a seed to sow for this next week as well for our sow along. Hopefully you're all going to go and sow celery this week, now that you've seen the video doing it, and we've discussed that a little. So mission, celery, your homework. That's what I was going to do as well. Your homework. So potatoes, they are in garden centres. They are now for sale for seed potatoes. And I think I said this last year, but I want you to go into a garden centre or go online and just tell me what seed potatoes you are going to be buying, or what varieties of potatoes you are going to be growing this year. That is your homework. Work out what potatoes you're going to grow this year and where you're going to get them from. All good fun. All good fun. Rob's allotment is asking, Chili Kate, what did you sow? Digwell says that Rob's gets a mention in his video today. Gary says, I've learned to enjoy the process and not to get too caught up by the outcome. Talking about tips for the allotment. Agree. Totally agree with that. What have we got? What have we got? Graham says, once it comes up, that is, it's going to go slow again. So I'll read it out. I'm sowing from tomorrow. Now my 5 meter of grow lights has just arrived. There it goes. Building the box tomorrow and running from my shed solar setup. Oh, that would be great to see your solar setup. That would be really good to see, actually. Rebecca says she's really enjoyed listening to all of tips tonight. Thank you. Let's hope this is my year. Let's hope it's everyone's year. But as I said, we want to follow everybody's process in the group and see how we all get on. So please do take lots of photos. Rebecca is on Instagram as well. If anybody wants to go and see her, it's Little Black and I'm trying to remember Little Black and White Cat something. Remind me your Instagram handle, please, and then I put that up here. Kate says, I'm volunteering again at the Potato Day this year. I'll take photos. When is your Potato Day? But a few people were asking about that because we've not seen any. Digger says, I have one variety that is a secret. SSLOL SSPC 2024 Single Seed Potato Challenge 2024. I will be joining in as well. It's on. I know what I'm doing now. It is on. Nicola has Jerusalem artichokes growing already. Richard, yeah, fantastic. It is so mild. It has been up until today. Today is the first time we've got. First time I've had to defrost the windscreen on the van. To say. Stuart says, just want to say a very big thank you for tonight's live. As always, it's very helpful. See you all next week. Greg says, enjoy it, whatever you do. Make friends too. You'll probably end up doing swaps and surplus plants with each other. Another good tip for newbie allotments. Enjoy it and make friends. And he goes on to say, I've already got seed potatoes this year. Excellent stuff. Chili Kate's answering a question about when it comes up. What seeds, chili seeds sown? Scotch bonnet, basket of fire, Apache, Cayenne, Shakira, and one more that I have forgotten. Good stuff. Good stuff. Kate says her seed potato days are 27th of January in Nottingham. Good stuff. Good stuff. I can't think of any potato days near me other than the usually sell potatoes at the CD Sunday in Brighton that I'll be going to. Graham says, thanks for the live, guys, and have a good night with the gardening family. That's what we are here, definitely a family. Turbo Stream says, task, dig up that poor gooseberry bush. I like that. I think that's what I was kind of hoping you were going to suggest that. Yeah, I think we will go. Rebecca says, that's right, the Little Black and White Cat. Thank you for the shout out. You are most welcome. I do have to spend more time on Instagram, I will admit. So I do see, I'll go on there every now and then and see what everybody is doing. But I do need to spend a bit more time. I need to spend more time on all social media, to be honest with you. I don't know where I find the time, though. There is always tomorrow. Good tip. There is always tomorrow. Digwell says, I'll pull a shot of my basket of fire on Facebook. Still fruiting. Excellent stuff. Night, one and all, says Andrew. Thanks, Richard. Good to connect with you and the Veg Army. Good to see you too, Andrew. We will be getting out for you fairly soon. Is this live every week? Yes, every Sunday at 6 p.m. we go live. It's a gardening chat, as we call it. We normally have a subject that we want to discuss. We need a subject for next week. That's it. We need a subject for next week quickly. We normally have a subject, but we, at the same time, if anybody has a question, we will try and help each other out at the same time. Always good to see, and we welcome if anybody wants to send in videos as well. We welcome that. Graham says, SSP the 2024, bring it on. Got my other seed potatoes ready for the year as well. Chili Phil, lemon Agi is the final chili variety we planted. Table Stream, have a good week. Seeds for next week could be lettuce, as mine have failed again. There we go. Lettuce for next week. Done. What have we got? Yes, you did set last year as I took some. That's what I remembered. That's what I remembered. So good night. Rebecca says, good night. See you all next week. Bethan says, night all. See you next week. Yeah. Just quickly. Right, it's got stuck again. But Rebecca is saying, as a subject for next week, gardening jobs of the month is always good to discuss. You know what? I've got an idea for that. With gardening jobs, that's definitely something we could do. Richard, do you think they will be selling potatoes at CD Sunday? Usually they do. Whether they are this year, I don't know. I wouldn't rely on it, but I think they will be. I can ask the question. I can ask the question. Oh, chili growing. Didn't somebody mention that last week? I can't remember. Anyway, we get the idea. We need to get out of here. Always a pleasure joining you guys. I will work out what we're going to do next week. But if anybody does want to send in any videos, then please do. So for the seeds, we're going to sow lettuce, and the challenge is to dig up, excuse me, that gooseberry bush. Right, guys, this has been an absolute pleasure talking to you again. Sorry we've had so many technical issues once again. I'm going to play around and see what we can do. Right, guys. Oh, we did chilies just before Christmas. I thought we did somewhere. Right, guys, you take care, and I'll see you again next Sunday, 6 p.m.